Hey everybody, welcome to the UX Group Conversation. I am Christy Leneville, VP of User Experience. Very pleased to have you here today. And Sid, looks like you have the first question.
Well, the first one is a statement. I love the OKR scoring. It's very quantitative, right? And that's super hard in design. And I love the amazing job there. The move to pajamas, measuring all kind of things. There's hard numbers. It's not even percentages. It's like we need 400 things. And I think that's very empowering. Thanks for putting in the time beforehand, before the start of the quarter, to kind of nail those numbers. And I think it really helps to motivate people and to achieve the goal. So well done.
Thank you. I want to give a lot of credit to Tori for setting that all up. So thank you, Tori.
Cool. I heard from Eric Johnson that you might have thought of a way to measure improvements in usability and what eventually ends up in a system usability score more directly, for example, by only measuring it on .com and things like that. I think that's super interesting. Usability is so important, and the quicker the feedback loop, the better. Can you maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to start off by thanking Anoop. He came with some really challenging questions for us around SUS, which we really, really appreciated. And so that spurred us to start thinking about, how can we make SUS less of a lagging indicator? It's always going to be a lagging indicator to some extent, but how close can we get it? And so we do have a KR during Q4 to introduce a new methodology. We're actually going to run it in parallel with our existing methodology. So we make sure that we understand what the difference is between those things. But I actually want to turn it over to Adam, because Adam did a lot of work on this. So Adam, tell us more.
Yeah, thanks. You're spot on, Christy. So yeah, there's going to be more focus on the .com user. So we're able to actually see some of those changes right away, because that was one concern was, well, how do we know if the changes we're making are actually having an impact on some of those big usability issues? So that's one thing. And even before that, we're going to conduct a lot of research to help our teams understand which of those big usability issues would have the biggest impact on the SUS score, so that gives our product team much more confidence as they go in and start to work on the right things.
Yeah, that's great. So one of the big changes that we've made, just to get a little more specific, is instead of just using our first look panel, which is a relatively small panel, we're going to move to using the data warehouse to send the SUS out. That's going to allow us to be more granular in who we're targeting, and it also gives us a much larger base of people to target, which we think is important. Focusing on .com is part of it. We're also starting to think about paid versus free and some other ways that we can segment this data and look at it a little bit differently. We don't know what to expect yet. So we're excited to see the outcome of that. And that's also, again, why we're going to run it in parallel with our current methodology. We want to understand what is the difference that we're seeing. So we don't want to just drop the previous way that we've been doing it. Adam was talking about more directly in finding the usability problems that we can to help drive SUS. So we have another KR around that for Q4, which is identifying the top 10 usability problems in the product. By the way, we will likely focus on most used areas of the product. So they may not be the things that are most egregiously unusable. It's the things that are most unusable and most visible to the largest part of our customer base. The plan, and Anoop and I have talked extensively about this, is once we have that listing of 10, which will probably take us some research even to get there, he and I are going to use that to feed into a Q1 OKR, so we can focus on improvements in to at least, may not be all 10, it kind of depends on what the scope of these things are, but we can figure out what makes sense for a quarter's worth of work.
Oh, very exciting. Thank you.
Great question. Thank you. Let's see here. Mike Long.
Hello. On slide 18, that 4 hours per designer per milestone, it just felt kind of low. And I wonder if there's this effect where when we do finish troubleshooting GDK and accomplish our goal, that when we look back on that experience, we don't remember it as being as painful. And so I'm wondering if we have a way of knowing what the aggregate time is that designers spend on GDK. And part of that is to understand what efficiency benefits are we getting from Gitpod quantitatively.
Yeah, I'm going to give a little bit of context and then I'm going to turn it over to Marcel. So what Mike is talking about is the UX team worked with Gitpod and with members of the engineering team at GitLab to get our GDK on Gitpod so that it's much, much easier to maintain and deploy. That came out of pain points that we were hearing from designers, but also from the community around the amount of time that people were spending on GDK. So we think that this is a really meaningful improvement, not just for us, but for the wider GitLab community. So Marcel, tell us more about that.
Sure. Thank you for the introduction. It's exactly as you mentioned, we saw this as one of the biggest pain points for designers working at GitLab, constantly having to maintain, update, or fix the GDK. And especially every time it breaks, there's a high chance you need to pull in another engineer to help you out. So we are basically spending 2 people's worth of time to get something fixed that shouldn't be broken that often. And what we then worked on was, first of all, getting this new setup in place with Gitpod. And there we got a lot of help from multiple teams across GitLab, but also Gitpod. Then merging it into our code base. And now we are making it hopefully even easier and faster. And we are adding more functionality right out of the box so that when you start it, it directly has, for example, runners configured. That's something we are working hard on, because what we saw, for example, in the last milestone, there were designers who suddenly needed runners who didn't need it before. They took 8 hours. This is one anecdote. 8 hours to just configure the runners on the GDK. Whereas with Gitpod, it now takes roughly 15 minutes. And that's where we really see a lot of efficiency improvements.
Yeah, thank you for that, Marcel. Hyana.
Yeah, thanks, Chrissy. Now, I just wanted to highlight that it's a rough estimate, but 4 hours is a lot, especially if we have to run GDK to review a small front-end change. And for example, with the buttons migration of pajamas, I personally had the experience where I spent most of the time fixing GDK rather than reviewing the merge request. So I'm really excited for Gitpod.
Anoop.
Yeah, I had a quick question. Are there any learnings that we should integrate into this for ourselves, all our engineers who are not using Gitpod, and also for other contributors, open source, who want to download GDK and use it?
Yeah, it is available for anyone to use. And we actually have had community contributors already use it and be really excited about it. So the other thing is we do have an open issue right now to do research on the GDK. So we're poking around. Adam has been heading that up, but to see whether or not we actually wanted to do a survey on GDK, if we want to run it just internally, if we want to run it externally too, so that we can learn more about what we can do, what the pain points are. Does that answer your question, Anoop?
Yes, thank you.
And just to add to that quickly, we also have multiple engineers who already are using Gitpod, either because it's their preferred way already, or because we had one engineer for whom the entire GDK or the entire MacBook was broken. And instead of first needing to set up their own private MacBook with everything around GDK, they were able to jump in to Gitpod right now and were able to use that for, I think it's now almost 1.5 weeks without any downtime. So there's also a significant improvement for these kinds of cases.
Yeah, thanks for all those great details, Marcel. And Marcel, I know you worked really hard to push this forward. So thank you for your work on it in general.
It was definitely a team effort. There were so many people involved, and it was really a great experience to also dive so deep into the GDK.
Awesome. All right, Sid, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks for toning down the notes in the docs. Like you change the colors on pages with more than 10 notes, you reduce it by an order of magnitude. Thanks for that. everything in the world can be a note, and we were overusing them a bit. Thanks for the quick action. I really appreciate it.
Yes, you're welcome. That was easily quantifiable. So thanks.
Yeah, but you did quantify it, and you should be proud. Like, it's very rare to get these numbers. And the normal thing is, oh yeah, we reduced the notes by a lot. Not like, hey, on page 2, more than 10 notes XYZ. It's super cool. It's very inspiring.
Thanks.
Yeah, we wanted to say thank you, Sid, for the feedback on that. I think it was a very apt observation, and we were really pleased to be able to make that change. This gives me a foot in the door to be able to bring everyone's attention to the fact that we're making a bunch of changes to the docs site right now, and we're really, really excited about it. Susan is in the process right now of putting together a longer-term roadmap for themed changes that we're going to make to the site, but the changes have already started. If you look at the slides, you'll see we're trying to start with just low-hanging fruit tactical changes that are easy to get in there and just make right away. And then there will be some other things that are a little bit larger, will take us a little bit more time. Some of it's going to need some engineering help, and that's okay. But there was a really significant user research effort that we did around the documentation site to understand who is coming to the site, what are their pain points, what do we need to focus on. The other really cool thing that Susan and team did was they met with the docs leadership from a couple of other companies who are exemplars in terms of the documentation that they provide to their communities. I can't share the names of those because the companies asked us not to share them even internally in the company. But that being said, learned some really interesting things from them too. So we're super excited. The docs team is super passionate about making the documentation experience really, really good. And I think we've already got a nice start, but we've still got a lot of work to do. Who else? This has been great. No one's asked about design iteration, which is a huge theme in our deck. So I'll say, look at the stuff we have on design iteration if you haven't already. We've got blog posts, we've got OKRs focused on it, both in Q3 and then also upcoming in Q4. So big push, big theme for us right now. Okay, giving it 5 more seconds. Because I love these and I really don't want to leave until I get all the questions I can get. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you for your